As we know, China is influential, powerful, and wealthy, but there are many reasons beyond their emphasis on education that led to their modern reputation. It began with a protest, then a battle, and a decision made to heal the scars created by conflict. In 1989 at Tiananmen Square, citizens of China began taking a stand against the government, seeking political reform, but they were silenced by force. In order to fix the relationship with its people, the government gave economic freedom, which caused the 1990s economic explosion, creating the influential and mighty country it is today. Hu Yaobang was a high-ranking official of the People's Republic of China. He was the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, held the position as chairman and general secretary. Yaobang also supported political reform in China's government until he died of a heart attack on April 15, 1989. Many students came to mourn his death and praise him for supporting political reform. On April 17th, a few thousand students went to the People's Congress with a list of demands. 2 days later, student leaders met at Zhenhuman Gate in Beijing, right outside the Communist Party's headquarters, to place a wreath honoring Hu, also giving headquarters additional demands including freedom of speech, the right to demonstrate against the government, and a mandate to stop corruption in the government. Police attempted to control about 10,000 protesters. Although the officers told them to leave, more immense crowds returned. The people's numbers grew as college professors and more students joined. Students refused to attend class even at the risk of being arrested. In the People's Daily, a government newspaper, student leaders were condemned, saying they wanted to plunge the whole country into chaos and sabotage the political situation of stability and unity. This riled up the public because they were protesting solely to improve life in China. They were nonviolent and did not intend to overrun the government or create chaos. The next mass gathering was on May 4, 1989, the 70th anniversary of the first major student protest over the Treaty of Versailles. In Beijing, people marched into the square singing songs calling for reunification and saying, "We seek democracy, we seek freedom." Journalists were censored in China, making it no shock when they joined protesters on May 4th for freedom of speech. On May 13th, when the regime continued to deny a meeting with the student leaders to discuss their dispute, 2,000 students established a hunger strike. One man said, "We will defy death to win life for the nation." Within a couple of days, the numbers increased to 3,000. Approximately 150,000 people loaded into Tiananmen Square when Mikhail Gorbachev, General Secretary of the Soviet Union, came to meet with China's leaders, bringing international attention with him. Leaders tried keeping Gorbachev and others from the square, but people had signs praising him for trying to give people their rights and applauded his car as it passed. It was a short visit, but over 1 million people came to show support. By this time, nearly everyone was protesting, even some of China's military. High officials and loyal soldiers seemed to be the only ones not joining the protesters. The leaders had handled student protests before, but once laborers of China joined, the situation became serious to the government. Subsequently, on May 20th, the government officially declared martial law, resulting in approximately 300,000 military troops entering the square. As large transport trucks brimming with officers came, people flooded the streets, restricting them from moving, and began lecturing the officers. They told the officers the city was peaceful, and they only wanted freedom for the people. One woman said, "Brother soldiers, do you know anything about what we are doing? Brother soldiers, you should be defenders of the people." Protesters also showed affection towards the troops, giving them food and water. They even brought their young children, who asked things such as, "How are you, Uncle Soldier?" This greatly impacted the soldiers, who were confused, as most of them were from rural areas. Not wanting to bring harm to anyone, the officers left 4 days after they were stopped. On May 30th, art students built a 33-foot sculpture modeled after the Statue of Liberty and named it the Goddess of Democracy. On June 3rd, thousands of soldiers came with weapons and strict orders to clear the square by 6 a.m. the next day, but with no bloodshed. People blocked the army any way possible, and closer to the square were human walls that were shot through. The following day, the army arrived about 1:30 a.m., surrounding the people and bringing a deafening noise of gunfire. People stood their ground, running to and from the gunfire as they were shot. There was also an endless announcement saying, "Under the martial law regulations, no one should be on the street. If you stay on the street, you will be responsible for what happens to you." The army shot in various directions, shooting people in the surrounding buildings who were in their homes. Around 4 a.m., the lights in the square were turned off. About 15 minutes passed before the square's display lights turned on, showing that the Goddess of Democracy statue had been knocked over by a tank. Everyone was surrounded and believed they would be shot, but they were granted immunity if they left immediately. Although most wanted to stay, Feng Sudu, a student leader, said that they should go and avoid a pointless massacre. They had made their point. Later that morning, parents went to the square, saying they wanted to go and search for their children. An officer counted to 5 before shooting at everyone. 3 to 4 dozen people were shot while running away, but returned every hour approximately 7 more times before they stopped. Streets were filled with burning vehicles, broken glass, corpses, and more. While the injured were rushed to overflowing hospitals, others began searching for family and friends. By June 5th, the army had total control of Tiananmen Square. Huge clouds of smoke came from the square as everything was burned. On that same day, even after all the oppression and death, one man took one last stand against a row of tanks. On Chang'an Avenue, a man moved in front of a long line of tanks. As the tanks attempted to move around him, he moved in front of them, again and again. The tanks stopped, and the man climbed up and began to yell. Onlookers claim he yelled, "Why are you here? You have done nothing but create misery. My city is in chaos because of you." He crawled off and once again halted the tank from going around him before being pulled away by spectators. His name was never learned and has only been referred to as the Tank Man. His story is known worldwide, except in China. In the days following, students covered bulletin boards in front of the People's University with pictures and placed bloody clothes on trees by the main gate. News coverage in China said there were a few bad men, with numerous onlookers, and that Tiananmen Square had been cleared peacefully, with no loss of life, except for the uncooperative men who stopped the army from doing its job. Once China released a most wanted list of student leaders, many were already escaping the country, fleeing arrest. Carefully going back to their normal lives, the government continued censoring the media and showing videos of the army defending themselves after attacks. Today there are videos and pictures from photographers and others who smuggled them out of the country. The rest of the world boycotted China, refusing all loans and halting all projects with them. Martial law stayed in Beijing until 1990, while protest leaders were assembled and taken to prison. Others were forced to work in remote areas of China. A large number of students and teachers were politically marked and sent to rural areas, never to be employed again. If news anchors sounded sympathetic to students during their reports on what happened, they were fired. With all the protesting, there was no political reform, but to fix the bonds between the government and its people, the government worked toward economic freedom. This led to the 1990s surge in China's economy, but indirectly forced the countryside into poverty over time. China's economic expansion in the 1990s was the result of civilians' demand for political reform from the government. The government refused, using the military to stop the crowds, and then brought economic change to mend the bonds with their people. If Hugh had not died and given the students a reason to begin taking a stand, there would be no reason for the government to change anything, economically or otherwise. Therefore, not giving China the opportunity for economic expansion of that magnitude in the 1990s. Remember, do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail, because you might just change the course of a nation.